Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2. And we're going to start off exactly where I told you we would, and that is with the recap of the radio underneath. So you'll see that I've replaced all the waxy caps in here. They're all gone. Here's all the victims, the soldiers. And when I did this, I did it very specifically for one reason, the way I've done it. And that is so that I have room to get to these wires. So I've left them a little bit higher than they normally are, so I've got room to get in there. If you look in here, there's really not a lot of wires in here. There's a couple of wires connecting the filament string, that some of them that go to the on-off switch and the power switch. A lot of them come out of the cans and go to the speaker and to the antenna. So I've made the decision I'm just going to get those old wires out of there. And I have to be honest with you, I did get a little prodding from our good friend John from Arkansas, who said, "Hey Ron, that idea sucked. Change those wires. You're not putting any crazy glue on those things. Those wires got to go. They're 85 years old." Anyway, he didn't really say that, but he's right. So the wires have to get out of here. So we're going to take our time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to document every connection under here. I want to build a wiring diagram underneath the chassis. And I'll tell you why later. Well, I'll give you a little hint. I have another one of these, but it's in bad shape. There's no insulation left on any of the wires. So I'm going to take my time and firmly document exactly what's happening here. And then I have another radio, blue dial, perfect case, exactly the same as this one, that I'll be doing off camera on another series. So I'll have two of these things in great shape. I am going to have to take the cans out, and I have no problem doing that. Tuning cap, I'll have to take a look at it and remove it. There's 3 screws right here. And we'll see what I have to do here, if anything. I'm going to try to avoid taking this whole thing out, if I can. But you'll see there's a couple of wires here. Here's a green one that has to get replaced. But they're actually in good shape, so I may be able to get away with it. We'll see. And the band switch, we'll see how clean that is and what we need to do. So next step is going to be check the resistors. Make sure the resistors are all in tolerance. Probably not, so we'll replace those. This resistor right here is our, I believe this is our voltage dropping resistor. Comes right in off the AC. So it doesn't look like it's burnt or showing any signs of getting hot, but we'll check it. And that's pretty much where we are. So anyway, let me get back to it. I'm going to take a look at the resistors, check those out, and then we'll get to our plan with changing the wires out. Okay, I'll be back. One other thing I want to point out is our filter cap is right here. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to remove the cap or if I'm going to mount a terminal strip right here and put my caps there, or a terminal strip here. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to think that through. I'll let you know along the way though. Now, there's 2 things you could do with the radio. You can repair it or you can restore it. If I just left those caps in there and put it back in the cabinet, it's repaired, but it's not restored. And those wires are going to break. Guaranteed. They're going to continue to deteriorate. So we're going to make a decision. We're just going to move ahead, and we're going to replace all those wires. Now, this is a difficult set to do that with because it's so crammed in this area. So you really got to take your time and do your documentation. You could follow the schematic. That's one way to do it. But I've chosen to do something that's a little bit more sustainable and something that'll probably help a lot more people in the future. So what I did was I took a piece of heavy stock and I traced the bottom of the chassis. I then flipped it over and traced it on the other side. So it's really a representation of what we have here. I put all the tube sockets and the pins. Then I took a photocopy of that and multiplied it several times and documented all the wires in here. So here's the red wires. I show exactly where the red wires are in there because when I restore it, I'm going to use the same color wire to make it true. And I show all the connections. Here's the IF cans, here's the filter cap, and so on, so on. Sorry, I had to replace my battery. So there's the red. There's all the blue wires. Same deal. Here's all the green wires. There's all the black wires. That's our dial lamp. There's all the brown ones. And there's all the gray ones. The gray ones were probably white originally. Now one last piece of paper we have is just the representation of what should be on each tube socket. So this way when I get done I make sure I've gotten everything correct. So I've got a reference to look back in. So at this point you're saying, why did he go through all that trouble? It's a good question. And I'll tell you why. Because anybody that restores one of these is going to have to rewire them. And depending on your level of experience, you may or may not do it. Or you may just chance it. Now, as luck would have it, I found another one of these radios on eBay. Same radio. Blue dial, perfect mint condition, for like 20 bucks. Somebody didn't know what they were selling. Another cabinet, perfect condition. However, that one people have worked in, and there's absolutely no insulation left on the wires. So I'm going to have to do this rewire twice. So let me show you what that other one looks like. So we'll move the one we're working on. Here's the one that's gotten bastardized. And you can see there's no insulation. It's just bare wire in there. So I'm going to do a rip out here and just redo this entire section. When I get to here, I'll figure it out. But I just have to rip all this out because I don't know what they did in here. There's all kinds of crazy solder connections in here. I just don't know. So that's going to be what we do on the second one. But this is not going to be for this series. This will be a project that I do off camera. So back to our patient here. So the next step is going to be for me to start replacing these wires. Okay? So that's going to be what we do next. So let me end this segment. I want to talk a little bit about safety. So let's do that now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about safety. So it was brought to my attention as a good reminder that there could be people watching my channel that don't have a lot of experience with radios. So I can't assume everybody knows exactly what to do and what I'm talking about. Good, really fair point, actually. So I'm going to take just a couple of moments to talk a little bit about safety and the hobby and what you need to do. So if you've never worked on one of these before, it's quite daunting. You look at the bottom of that thing, like the one I just showed you that has no insulation on it, and you will quickly get overwhelmed and say, I can't do this. Just remember that if you follow a schematic is really just point to point to point to point to point. And if you're able to look underneath the chassis and identify the components and where those points are, you could do the restore or the repair, whatever you want to do. Tube sockets, for example, are generally numbered 1 through 8. On some tubes, it's 1 through 7. On some tubes, they leave pins off altogether because the tube that it's required doesn't even use it. So you have to look at those things, all those clues. But the main thing is safety. All right? So, first thing you'd never, ever, ever, ever do is plug in a power cord that's frayed. Right? All you're doing is looking for trouble. You're going to pop your circuit breaker. You're going to get a shock. You're going to burn your house down. Whatever it is, it's not going to be a good story. So you have to do a visual inspection of all these things and make sure that they're safe. Now in episode 1, you saw me plug the radio in and test it, and I also pointed out that the wires going to the dial lamp where the insulation was missing. But I did make sure that they were not shorted before I plugged it in. I did that off camera. You also want to take a look underneath the chassis and look for components that are burnt. Look for scorch marks. If you see any of that stuff, don't plug it in, obviously. Most of these radios that you buy, the cord is cut for a reason, because people don't want you to plug it in. So if you're able to get a baseline of how the radio works like I did, great, that's cool. At least I know that it works. But if it doesn't, how do you check? Well, if you look at your coils, your IF coils, on the schematic, 9 times out of 10, it tells you what the ohm reading should be across the coils. So what are the things that can break? Coils can be open. If the coil's open, it's not going to work. Your antenna coil, your first stage, your second stage, it's not going to work. So you want to check your coils, and we'll give a demonstration of this in another video. You want to make sure that there's no shorts, and you can do that all with your multimeter. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because this is not an electronics course, but There's ways that you can check and see if the radio is actually worth restoring. So typically what people do is they ohm out, if it has a transformer, they ohm out the transformer windings, the primary, the secondary. They ohm out the IF cans to make sure that they're working. Once you have that, it's pretty simple if you can do that. Then you want to change your filter caps. You always want to change your filter caps. Filter caps generally dry out after about 20 years. Now the ones that were made in 1930 probably last a lot longer than the ones that are made today in China. But still, if they were made, if you have an original filter cap in there and it's been in there since 1930, odds are it's not good. Okay, and what it's going to do is if you continue to run it like that, it's going to burn out your transformer, and it's going to burn out your coils, your speaker. It's going to do things to your radio that you don't want to happen. So, as a general rule, replace filter caps. Make sure that they're all fresh and clean, and you've got that done. And you know the last important thing, and our good friend John from Arkansas, who is right here, made an analogy many years ago at this point and said that electricity is like a caged animal. It's always looking for a way to get out. Great analogy. He's right. So what you want to do, never put both hands in a radio, first of all. One hand behind your back, right? You don't want to give the electricity a path to go anywhere. One hand. You'll get bitten. You'll get a shock, but it won't go through your heart. Never wear watches and rings and things like that, because all you're doing is creating a place where you can contact something and get shocked. Always remember that filter capacitors, even if they've been sitting on a shelf for 10 years, can still retain a charge. A lot of these radios, when they were designed, didn't have bleed resistors on the capacitors. So the filter capacitors, or any capacitors that are electrolytic, will retain a charge for a period of time until it drains out. So you want to check those. You want to discharge those safely. There's ways to do that. And you want to make sure that you always pay attention and watch carefully what you're doing. Think 3 times before you do something. Think about what could happen. All right, so enough of that. I'm preaching to the choir here, but I wanted to just make sure I cover the basics. Make sure that you look at all those things, and you should enjoy doing this stuff. So this episode is going to end here because I'm not going to make any progress on the wiring at this point. I need to do all that this weekend. So I'm going to put this video up, but the rewiring is going to begin. I'm going to remove the IF cans because the wires, I'll show you. Let me flip this around. Okay. So the wires coming out of these IF cans are just as brittle as the other ones. So we're going to have to remove the cans, replace the wires, put the wires through. I'm going to use the same color codes and replace them. I'm also going to have to remove the tuning condenser, which is under this bird's nest, and we'll talk about that in another episode. And the speaker is also good, but I don't think we need to do anything with the speaker. The speaker doesn't have the rubberized wire for some reason. It's got cloth wires, which is great. That's good news for us. So we won't have to do anything with rewiring the speaker. So that's where we stand. Once I get done with this radio, I'm going to make the documentation available to anyone that wants it. I'll also put a link in the video. This way anyone can look at this and have a roadmap to follow. At the end of it, I'm also going to take a clean schematic and I'm going to color code the wires that are on the schematic. Now, that's a little more difficult because the schematic is not a generally good representation of how it's actually wired. So I'll have to think about doing that one, investing the time in that. But anyway, that's how we're going to attack this one, and I've got a surprise coming for you in the next video. We're going to do a preview of my next project after this. And I'm only going to say one thing, and I'll give you a hint. It's a very rare radio, extremely rare, hard to find, and it's worth a lot of money. And we have one. Matter of fact, let me show you the box. Contents of this box will be in the next video. All right. I'll give you a hint. Think King Tut. All right, guys, take it easy. See you next time.